Welcome to your Global Executive Briefing. I'm your host, and today we're decoding the weekend intelligence straight from the Wall Street Journal for July 25th and 26th, 2026. Think of this explainer as your high-octane terminal for the week ahead. We're broadcasting right from the pulsing heart of the global economy, where those corporate offices stretch across the New York City skyline, and honestly, the markets never really sleep. We've got a ton of ground to cover today, so let's get right to it. Here's the rundown for today's briefing. We're hitting front-page flashpoints, heading over to the business desk, diving into finance and investments, and wrapping up with the opinions page. Let's dive in.
First up, front-page flashpoints. We're looking at global geopolitics and some truly unprecedented action. The sheer velocity of these global developments right now, it's just staggering. First off, Bahrain and Kuwait have covertly sent jets to attack sites inside Iran. This is a massive paradigm shift. It's literally their first direct retaliation against Tehran, and it really highlights the incredibly tough spot Arab states are in as these regional conflicts grind on. Meanwhile, we've got a transatlantic trade dispute heating up. The U.S. is threatening new tariffs on the EU, and that's a direct response to the bloc slapping fines on American tech firms. Oh, and over in international law, the ICC just ousted its chief prosecutor, Karim Khan, over sexual assault allegations. It is just rapid-fire geopolitical realignment playing out right in front of us.
And you know, these high-level macro events, they're grounded in some harsh physical realities. Tens of thousands of residents and tourists are literally fleeing southwestern Europe right now as massive summer wildfires rage. The sky in places like Lacanau, France, is completely choked with smoke from these climate-fueled heat waves. It's turning what should be a traditional summer holiday into an absolute hellscape. It's a really stark, vivid reminder of the environmental pressures compounding all our global economic challenges.
All right, let's pivot to the business desk. We've got massive corporate moves and escalating tech wars.
$81 billion. Seriously, let that number sink in for a second. That is the colossal scale of the mega merger between entertainment giants Paramount and Warner Bros. Discovery. But all that momentum just hit a brick wall. The deal is abruptly paused until legal challenges are resolved, or at least until June 2027. We've got 12 states and the Writers Guild of America fighting this on antitrust grounds. When an $81 billion domino stops falling, believe me, the entire media landscape feels the aftershocks. Now we're looking at a real tale of two massive corporations with vastly different fortunes right now. On one hand, you have Verizon. They're beating Wall Street expectations, aggressively going after new revenue streams, born from this whole AI infrastructure boom. They are riding that tech wave beautifully. But on the flip side, Volkswagen was just forced to slash its sales forecast for the year. The reason? A sudden, severe collapse in China's car market, plus domestic Chinese automakers making rapid gains and basically taking over VW's traditional European heartlands. It's a brutal reminder of the golden rule: adapt or get left behind.
Speaking of adapting, let's rapid fire through some major tech developments. SpaceX just successfully launched its massive rocket post-IPO, keeping Elon Musk's venture way up in the stratosphere. In fintech, Robinhood is actually in talks with Crypto.com to dive much deeper into prediction markets. In enterprise software, SAP shares are climbing, and that's all thanks to some incredible resilience in their cloud revenue. But the real heavyweight story here, China is forging a domestic AI chip committee specifically to beat U.S. sanctions. With leader Xi Jinping's blessing, Vice Premier Ding has dusted off the exact same all-out, laser-focused approach China used to build its first atomic bombs back in the 1960s. They are treating this AI chip race like a literal arms race. Moving on to finance and investments. Let's talk market volatility and some really fascinating housing anomalies.
So this week is really a story of sheer market vulnerability. We saw broad stock sell-offs across the major indices. The tech-heavy NASDAQ took the absolute hardest hit, dropping 2.1%. The S&P 500 lost 0.6%, and the Dow slipped 0.4%. But you have to contrast that red ink with commodities. Brent crude oil spiked a massive 10% this week. Geopolitical shocks, like those covert airstrikes in Iran we talked about earlier, instantly ripple into commodity volatility, and we are seeing that explicitly reflected in the price of oil right now.
But right in the middle of that stock market drop, we're seeing an interesting economic anomaly. 628,000. That is the number of new single-family homes sold in June. It's an unexpected tick upward from May, and it outright beat the consensus of economists who only predicted 606,000 sales. So despite all those broader market anxieties, the real estate pulse is surprisingly strong.
And on the ground level, that housing pulse is being driven by a major microeconomic trend, the ex-urban boom. Take Lehigh Acres, Florida, for example.
Buyers who are completely priced out of major metros like Miami and Orlando are fleeing to these ex-urban communities just to build equity. We're seeing newly built 3-bedroom houses selling for $328,000. To put that in perspective, the monthly mortgage on that is basically equal to renting a tiny 1-bedroom apartment in Orlando. The cost of living crisis is literally actively redrawing the residential map of the United States.
Finally, let's turn to the opinions page. We're covering culture, metaphysics, and strategy.
There's a deeply provocative question posed in a review by Pamela Paul in this weekend's edition. Is it time to, quote-unquote, liquidate the study of sociology? It's a really stark headline, but it points to an ideological and existential battle that is currently tearing through modern academia.
At the very crux of the argument, the piece asserts that sociology is suffering a very public breakdown. The accusation here is that instead of producing rigorous thought, the discipline is fostering sectarian narrowness, exclusion, uniformity, and really driving the silencing and self-censorship of nonconformists. It's essentially arguing that the field has traded objective study for rigid ideological alignment.
And building on that theme of how we define our world, take a look at this op-ed from James Tarano. He's writing about the absolute myriad of legal controversies surrounding transgender identities, everything from equal protection to sports and medical standards. Tarano argues that beneath all the politics, this is fundamentally a question of ontology. He frames it as a metaphysical debate concerning the very nature of reality itself, asking whether there is an objective sense in which biology can actually be transcended.
And this exact ontological divide is playing out at the absolute highest levels of American law. Just look at the recent BPJ Supreme Court case. Justice Clarence Thomas states outright in his concurrence that men and boys with gender dysphoria are not women or girls, even if they believe that they are. But conversely, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson's dissent argues the exact opposite reality. She states the law in question forces the plaintiff to live as a boy though she is a girl. The journal's opinion pages are really highlighting how these two diametrically opposed views of reality are now codified right there in Supreme Court texts.
Okay, after that heavy philosophical debate, let's take a quick economic palate cleanser before we wrap up. Look at this incredible old-school business model from Las Vegas. The South Point Hotel intentionally loses up to $2 million every single month, keeping their classic $16.95 all-you-can-eat buffets alive. While the rest of Vegas has basically pivoted to affluent travelers and crazy expensive meals post-pandemic, South Point is dead set on maintaining the cheap breakfast just to get bodies in the door and keep the gambling circus going. Sometimes, losing a little money is exactly how you make a lot of it.
Which brings us to the end of our explainer. But I want to leave you with one final, propulsive question to ponder this weekend. We have seen covert airstrikes redrawing global battle lines. We've watched an $81 billion media merger freeze in its tracks, and tech giants mobilize with literal atomic-era urgency. The housing market is somehow defying gravity, while the stock market catches its breath. So, as an executive processing all of this data, what on earth will drive the markets when that opening bell rings on Monday? Stay sharp out there, and thank you so much for joining this edition of the Global Executive Briefing.